Welcome to our 11th book of the Bible. How proud of yourself are you? You know how proud I am of myself. And so we're starting with 2nd Samuel. We ended 1st Samuel, at the end when Saul and Jonathan died and David got recovered, pursued and recovered, from the Amalekites. And so we're picking up here when David hears about the deaths of Saul and his sons, especially his friend Jonathan. Obviously, that devastated him. So 2 days after defeating the Amalekites and returning to Israel, David heard the news of Saul's and Jonathan's deaths from an Amalekite who claimed to have killed him. In 1 Samuel 31:4, we learned that Saul had committed suicide to avoid being slain by an Amalekite. That was Saul trying to control the narrative of even his death, right? And his armor bearer, who he asked to kill him, refused and died after that. And this Amalekite was clearly lying when he told David that he was the one who killed him. Perhaps he was hoping to gain some reward from David, but he actually got quite the opposite. The Song of the Bow, that was the song that David composed, was recorded in the lost collection of the ancient songs that praise the heroes of Israel. And he composed this song celebrating Saul, yes, Saul, his mortal enemy, the man who tried to kill him, but he was still celebrating him and his bravery in battle. In it, he praised Saul and Jonathan for their bravery and encouraged the women to mourn for Saul while he expressed his deep love for his dear friend Jonathan. Since Saul was dead, David asked the Lord if he could return to Israel, and he was given the go-ahead to settle among his clan in the land of Judah. So David went up to Hebron and settled there. The war that broke out between the houses of David and Saul was one that eventually divided the kingdom. So if going forward, you see that David was the king of Judah, while they were now the kings of Israel. So there were two kingdoms, Judah and the rest of Israel. And Ishbosheth, he was the survivor and Saul's successor, and he was right. What did I write here? Hang on. Ishbosheth's survival as Saul's successor was instigated by Abner, the commander of Saul's army. But this obviously wasn't, in God's will. So we know that when the war broke out, the members of Saul's family were killed, but Ishbosheth survived. And it's no surprise that the battle-hungry Benjamites were part of of Israel's army. But the battle went on. But as the battle went on, Saul's army got weaker and David's army got stronger. Now I remember that one of the strategies that he tried to use when they met at the river, or it was like a river in a rocky place, was to that whole one-on-one combat, to find out whoever was left standing would be declared the rulers. But David, obviously David's men won. So we find out that David had 6 sons from 6 wives. Polygamy. It was not accepted by God, but obviously was tolerated while he was in Hebron. The business with Ishbosheth and Abner demonstrated the lack of honor among thieves. So after he had, helped him and instituted him as king over Israel, he goes and he suspects him of sleeping with his father's concubine. And the suspicion, truth or falsehood, of the claim and possible the motives behind Abner sleeping with the concubine because they said it had something to do with wanting the kingdom for himself, perhaps. It all reeked of mistrust, and Abner immediately deflected to David's side in retaliation. He even persuaded the elders, using God's promise to give the kingdom to David. In spite of all the wives David had, he still wanted Michal back. Do you wonder why? And I think that it had something to do with his ego, not out of love, or perhaps because of the price that he paid. Remember, Michal was Saul's daughter, who he had to get the Philistines' foreskin, whether he got 200 foreskins for, and obviously while he was away, Saul gave her to someone else, and he wanted her back. So that was the deal that he cut with Abner, that, okay, if you want me to come back and be king, bring my wife back to me. And I felt so sorry for her new husband, who they said just wept following her until they drove him back. She must have gone and started a whole new life, and then, yeah, poor her. I don't know. Anyway, so yes, it was probably for his ego and the price that he paid, and also to strengthen his claim to Saul's throne. This could also be the source of bitterness in her heart against David. We'll see that in the coming chapters. Joab's murder of Abner threw a spanner in the works of establishing peace, and David was so angry he cursed him and his household and wanted no part with it. Joab's motive for killing Abner could have been out of revenge, for killing his younger brother, and concerned that Abner was deceiving David, but it negatively impacted the treaty being discussed. David handed over the whole matter and punishment of Joab to God, and he mourned Abner in an honorable way. The rogues of Benjamin, that's what I called those boys, Bana and Rechab, who murdered Ishbosheth and took his head, hoping for a revenge, much like the Amalekites in the beginning, who came and told David that he had murdered Saul. I think that they come to David expecting a reward, but obviously they met the same fate, which was Saul commanding his men to kill them. And sorry, did I say Saul? David commanding his men to kill them. David was an honorable king. He referred to Ishbosheth as an innocent man. When those guys came to say they killed him, in spite of all he did, he still saw him as innocent, and he didn't think that he deserved to die in that way. So there was a lot to really unpack here, but I think it's just really unraveling the character of the kind of person that, the kind of king that David was, and it's actually quite admirable. So here's my hashtag getting to know God lesson. David showed through his action why he was called a man after God's heart. Even though, and there was all these conflicts, even through them all, killing and betrayal, he said, and I am weak, or in bracket, gentle today, even though anointed king. He called the sons of Zeruiah too harsh for himself. He says, these sons of Zeruiah are too harsh for me. And as king, one would expect him to be opposite, that he would have been harsh and not gentle, but he took the opposite direction. And that just kind of reminds me of God, because God demonstrated gentleness in all he was doing. He demonstrated gentleness in as a king. In Ezekiel 33:11, God says, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that they turn from their wicked ways and live. And David kind of demonstrated that here, because he was sad when Saul, Jonathan, Ishbosheth, his enemies, died, and he was like, they didn't deserve that. And that's a lesson for me too. I think when I think about bad things happening to seemingly evil people, I shouldn't rejoice. I should actually feel bad, because that's God's heart towards us. Thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow we'll go back to the Psalms, and we're reading a lot. 6, 8, 9 to 10, 14, 16, 19, and 21. See you here.